In 2012, you could buy a house in this country for $190,000. In 2023, the average house is $390,000. It has doubled in 12 years.
That's unbelievable.
That's insanity. So if you're a young kid coming out of school, you're screwed.
Yeah, it stinks if you happen to graduate right in 2009.
But let me tell you, if you bought Bitcoin in 2010 or 2012,
you're doing pretty good.
You've protected your purchasing power against inflation.
What's going on, guys? K-Dub here with another episode of Crypto Zombie. Welcome back to the channel. Hope you're having a great day today. A much needed, overdue update on what is going on with Bitcoin right now. And, you know, to be honest, really in the past week, not much has been happening. You can see right here, we've just been bouncing between the range of around $44,000 to around $41,000. Now, obviously, a lot of this has to do really just because it was sort of the holidays. There's really not as much trading happening. Also, we know that there is this massive anticipation for a potential Bitcoin ETF approval next year. And another thing, if we just kind of have a look over here, is, you know, the S&P has still not really put in, you know, I don't want to call it a double top, but it hasn't exactly gotten back to its all-time highs just yet. Very close. So there could be sort of that, you know, where investors are just waiting to see, getting that confirmation, okay, now we're fully back on in risk environment. I mean, even if we come over here and have a look at the DXY, it does look like it's continuing to break down into this channel, but we are finding support right around sort of the 100 area, and, you know, falling below that probably would bring us all the way back down to around 98, which would mean an increase, or at least a higher probability of a continuation of a rally in stocks and specifically Bitcoin. But obviously the big question on everybody's mind is, you know, everyone's anticipating this, you know, ETF approval. Are we over anticipating it, right? What if something goes wrong? What if there's a, I don't know, another rejection or something, which is very unlikely at this point, right? But the big question is, are we overreacting? Well, there are actually three things regarding this upcoming ETF that not a lot of people are talking about, which could be extremely impactful. And, you know, obviously we have this marketing war that's going to essentially end up taking place between all these different ETFs who are going to be fighting for your attention to get you to use their ETF versus the other guys, right? So that's going to be a marketing frenzy that we're going to see. Also, the fact that we are seeing probably the largest development on Wall Street in the pretty much last 3 decades, and it actually does have something to do with Bitcoin. So how much money could actually flow into this ETF based on some previous ETF, you know, numbers and statistics? We're going to crunch that data. I have tons of video clips to show you guys today. BlackRock news. We got a lot of stuff to go over. So, you know, obviously just, you know, just strap in and let's go, guys. Let's go. But before we do, I just wanted to, of course, friendly reminder that if you do want to trade on LevX, which is this exchange over here, they have unlimited withdrawal amounts and no KYC. So how long is that going to last? Nobody really knows. But right now they are doing the first 500 deposits are going to get your bonus matched up to $5,000, and they will give you a free long or short position of your choice. So it's basically free money. If you guys want, you could use that link below. Make sure it says invited by Crypto Zombie, or you're not going to have the perks that come along with that. And of course, MetaSignal's been slamming out as usual. We got this link which blasted through the third target. Same for Aave. Now, obviously, they all have not been winners, right? There have been some losers, although the winners are definitely outpacing the losers, but there is 6 spots left until 800 if you guys are interested. So, without further ado, my friends, let's dive in. Let's have a look. Because, you know, some people are thinking that we're going to be seeing something like this, you know, when the ETF approval happens, which obviously this is ridiculous. This is not even possible. This is an impossible chart, right? But, you know, if we do come on over here and we have a look at Natalie Brunell, she was over here and she was talking on Fox Business, and they were asking her, is this real anticipation, right? Is it really demand, or is it just something we're spreading around in the crypto space in an echo chamber?
Yeah, I think we should get ready for a big marketing campaign and a lot of clever ads competing for eyeballs and portfolios. And, you know, the regulators and the issuers are really focused on getting these Bitcoin products out there. They have been for several months, going back and forth over every detail. And I think what that tells us is that that there is consensus now all the way up to the top of government that Bitcoin is a legitimate asset. It's going to be delivered to the public in this new investment vehicle, and billions of dollars are going to flow into a technology network that has an absolutely scarce unit of account. So I expect it to outperform even this year when we're up more than 150%.
So talking about that advertisement war, right? We've already seen the Dos Equis guy how many times? Now Hashdex, they just dropped their new commercial.
You know, it's amazing to me the tremendous impact that the home computers have had on everyone, and yet it seems that people I've talked to say that it takes you longer to do something by putting it into a computer and calling it up again than if you just kept simple records yourself in the house.
And then we got another pleasant surprise from Van Eck. So again, we know that the SEC has been ramping up their meetings, but why would these guys be putting out these commercials if they really thought that there was not going to be a chance of approval? Seems kind of silly to start having advertisements and commercials playing if there's not actually that possibility, right? So Meltem Demirez was over here, and basically they were asking her, do you think that the market is over anticipating? Like maybe we're getting a little too excited?
What is the risk of the industry being wrong?
There's always a risk, Sonali. That's the reality. But if we look at some indicators, one great indicator, GBTC, the Grayscale Bitcoin Investment Trust, it is the largest in terms of AUM of the Bitcoin trusts listed in the US today, has been trading at a discount historically. That discount has really started to converge in the last few weeks and close. That's one important indicator. The second important indicator, prediction markets. How are people pricing? We see 90% certainty on approval. And then the last piece is, the SEC is a government agency. They have to share records of who they're meeting with, what they're doing. In the last few weeks, there's been a lot of meetings, even over the holidays, meetings of SEC staffers with some of the proposed issuers, including BlackRock, Van Eck, and others, to discuss specifics of these S1s, of these applications that have been filed. So on all counts, it looks like all the small technical issues that have emerged over the last few months are starting to be discussed, resolved. So all of those things, in my view, are leading to a lot of optimism.
So again, everyone says it might be a sell the news event, right? And that's possible. It could be a sell the news event maybe in the beginning. It will take a little bit to roll these products out, but I've showed you time and time again on this channel. For example, when the gold ETF was launched, we saw a massive price appreciation over the next years that came. And, just speaking about the quote-unquote biggest development on Wall Street in the last 30 years, we also have Natalie chiming in on why this is such a big deal.
Yes, I agree with what Michael Saylor recently said about the ETF being the biggest development on Wall Street in the last 30 years since the S&P 500 ETF was born. I actually just talked about this on my show this week. State Street debuted the SPY in 1993, and 30 years later, it's the largest, most liquid, and most heavily traded equity security in the world, with an average trading volume of more than $30 billion per day and more than $490 billion of assets under management. And that is just the SPY. There are 16 ETFs that track the S&P 500 today with a combined market value of nearly $1.3 trillion. And I think that's just a modest sampling of what the spot Bitcoin ETF could represent, because for the first time in history, we have an incorruptible, digital, global, rules-based, dominant monetary network with absolute scarcity. And it's not going to be a question of if you have Bitcoin in your portfolio, it will be a question of how much.
Now, you have to consider how many people are still very skeptical to invest in things like Bitcoin and crypto. Even some people that I know who are dabbling in the space, they still don't buy anything outside of just Coinbase, right? Like, they're not going to go on like a Bybit or a Levex or something like that and trade. No, they're just going to stick to the coins that are on Coinbase, right? But when you consider the amount of capital that could inflow, if you just look historically to what other products have done in the past, you can get an idea even with just a fraction of that capital. For example, Eric Belchune's, just ETFs in general, these are not crypto, just ETFs in general, The flows are about $105 billion in just December. Think about that, guys. $105 billion just in the month of December. So they have a decent shot to break all-time monthly records set in 2021. So in a nutshell, like Fred Krueger points out, could we see even just maybe $2 billion come into Bitcoin during the first month it goes live? Could we see it on the first day? We're talking close to 50,000 Bitcoin at these prices, 3 times Saylor's latest purchase, and add that to an additional 13,000 Bitcoin supply shock from the halving per month starting in April, and we have enough gasoline to launch a rocket to the moon in 2024. But again, I know I sound like a broken record, and we always talk about the ETF, but you really have to understand the even bigger picture at play and the FOMO that will eventually come in. But it's not just people trying to necessarily make money, right? There's also the fact that, let's be honest, not to be corny, but Bitcoin truly is for everyone.
I always thought the big attraction of crypto, Natalie, was that you can keep government out of it, regulation out of it. But it seems to me in order for it to expand and grow, you're going to need a little more regulation for it to prosper. Or am I kind of getting that wrong?
I see it as both. I think that it's going to be embraced both by individuals and on a larger scale by companies and governments. Bitcoin's primary function is as a store of value that can't be debased or manipulated, and it lays the foundation for more economic empowerment than any other asset. But it's also a superior technology that will improve every business, every bank, and every government and every family. It will empower the mountain man survivalist who's all about individual sovereignty, and it will also empower the Apples and Amazons to create useful applications that empower billions of customers. And it will empower banks to send money at the speed of light with final settlement on a Saturday. And it will empower cities like New York to fix their treasury so they're not drowning in debt. And it will empower the kid in a developing nation that is starved by hyperinflation. So I think it's going to empower everyone who embraces Bitcoin, and that will be the story of our generation.
By the way, side note, it's nice to see women in the crypto space. I feel like it's a very male-driven space, so I like to see that we do have some ladies representing the crypto space. Interestingly enough, actually, this was from NerdWallet. Less than half of women in the U.S. invest in the stock market. So there's about 48% of women currently invested in the stock market compared to 66% of men. This was a survey at NerdWallet, and it kind of makes you think, if less than half of women are even in stocks, there's got to be a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of that are into crypto. So not only is it going to open up the institutions, it's also going to open up that retail once they realize that the institutions are obviously getting involved, right? And like them or hate them, I mean, regardless of your opinion, Tucker Carlson also pretty much believes the same thing.
And the promise of Bitcoin, of course, I mean, as a non-Bitcoin expert, I'll just tell you my view of it, because I think it's true. The promise of Bitcoin is not just getting rich from Bitcoin. The promise of Bitcoin is you're independent of control by the people who devalued currencies since Rome, and they do it in every single currency is devalued because no politician over time can resist the temptation to print more money because it makes them more powerful. So that's just that's something that never ends. They always debase the currency, even digital currency. And they want to move to a central bank digital currencies. They get complete control of you. If you disagree with them, you can't eat. And Bitcoin offers really a way out of that. And that's totally indefensible. There's no way Janet Yellen, who really is a very dark figure, is never going to stand up and be like, I'm against Bitcoin because it would disempower me and allow the average person to have a little bit more control over his own life. Never going to say that. She's going to be like, terrorists use Bitcoin. Really, terrorists. By the way, any terror group she names has absolutely, without question, received funding from the U.S. State Department at some time or other, if I could just say. Which is another way of saying, you have no moral standing to lecture me about anything. You are my servant. Please be quiet as I go about my life. That is the right posture. And in fact, they shut down your bank account, which tells you everything about how you're on the right track.
You also have to consider the Lindy effect, right? If something has been around for 10 years, the likelihood of it being around for another 10 years are very good. Here was a great example from Timothy Peterson. He was talking about how 35 years ago, having a computer was not a necessity. It was a preparation for the future. Now a computer is a necessity. 94% of US homes have one. Today, Bitcoin is not a necessity. It's preparation for the future. In 35 years, it will be a necessity. And you gotta love these old video clips.
This year, people are looking at computers for gifts, despite the high costs.
Right now, we've got about 4 different types of computers.
Actually, there are dozens of different computers on the market. Discounts are usually hard to find, but not if you really look.
They're cut at least $200. Some are cut $100, but every machine has a really good price on it right now.
This model computer comes complete with enhanced speech and sound capabilities. You can record your own voice onto an audio file and save it on a disk. Believe it or not, there are many practical applications. It can help compose music, but more importantly, it can also help teach children with speech and hearing problems. Dealers say computer consumers want more practical models this year for their children.
The keyboard is very much like a typewriter.
And in case of high-tech phobia, parents can get crash computer courses before gift opening on Christmas Day.
It's not a necessity to have the computer in the home. It's a preparation for the future.
But while that preparation may be important, it can also be very costly.
Some very powerful computers today sell for well under $2,000.
That's still a lot less than when home computers first hit the market. So if you're willing to spend the money, this could be a high-tech Christmas.
It's actually kind of crazy that that computer, and I'm sure we all know the capabilities of a computer 35 years ago, is basically the same price as an iPhone today. So, I mean, I know some people complain about the price of iPhones, but when you, or phones in general, but when you consider that you were paying that same amount of money, 35 years ago, and think about inflation, that was very expensive for a computer, right? But nowadays, everybody has one, right? And like Saifedean almost points out, eventually it's not going to be an option. It is going to be a necessity.
It's not optional. I mean, you will either move there or you will watch your wealth lose its value as the people who put their money there appreciate. I mean, just think about it. If you have $1 million and you put them in a currency that's constantly depreciating, where somebody has $10,000 and puts them in a currency that's constantly appreciating, it's only a matter of time until they overtake you. And people are not stupid. They will realize this and they will want to move forward. So when I talk about Bitcoin adoption, people think of it as being like, say, Apple iPhone adoption. It's very nice and very cute, and then people will buy it. But I think that's not the model for Bitcoin. Bitcoin is more like gunpowder adoption. If you think about it, did the French army have a choice whether they should adopt gunpowder or not? Did they decide, no, you know what, we like to keep it real with sticks and stones and swords, and we're not going to use gunpowder? If any army that decided to do this, it didn't matter, because then another army with gunpowder would come and take over France. So eventually everywhere in the world ended up with gunpowder, either because people adopted it or because it was used against them. And I think Bitcoin is like that. Bitcoin is like financial gunpowder. It's the safest way of sending money halfway around the world, the most secure way, and it's the hardest money that we've ever invented. So it's not something that is, whether we should or want to, or whether people, we try to win people over.
But all right, enough with the philosophical, I know everybody wants to talk about the ETF, the inflows. We want our moon bags to pump, right? Well, again, Eric Balchunas points out that BlackRock is expected to seed IBIT with $10 million on January 3rd. Note the date, and that it's a pretty big bump up from the 100K they seeded in October. So they are obviously looking to move forward with all of this. And people saying, well, how do we know? I mean, is there really institutional interest, or is it just BlackRock? That's the narrative that they're pushing. Well, the CEO of Bitstamp right here, he runs a crypto exchange, and he can tell you from his own mouth that he's seen an increase in institutional investors.
I try not to speculate on prices, but I'm pretty excited about 2024 for a number of reasons. So the first is in continuing and even increasing institutional adoption. So we are seeing at Bitstamp a market increase in 2023, even in spite of all of the challenges and the headwinds that the marketplace has faced, the FTX, regulatory uncertainty, banking challenges. In spite of all of these things, institutions, even if they're not trading a lot or investing a lot, they have been onboarding and getting ready, I think, for increased adoption and hopefully some improved regulatory clarity, particularly in this part of the world.
Another thing that you have to consider is the simplicity of how easy it's going to be now for these people in the traditional space. Now, personally, I think crypto is very easy. I've been doing it for over 7 years now, right? For me, sending, receiving Bitcoin using a smart contract, not a big deal, right? For the average person, though, that is crazy. It's just too much for them, right? But you have to consider the fact, and this is another post from Fred Krueger, but I'm not going to play this video this time. Basically, he was commenting on what Michael Saylor was saying over here in this interview about the 15-second phone call. And in a nutshell, what does this mean? Well, you know, a lot of these people that have these traditional, you know, asset managers or financial managers or whatever you want to call them, financial, not providers, but not a financial advisor, I guess, because that's the thing. So, you know, now these guys are going to just pick up their phone, right? 15 seconds. Hey, Bob. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we already have, you know, we already have funds, you know, whatever, Infidelity or BlackRock, or just, you know, move some into there. And, yeah, just, you know, allocate 1% to Bitcoin. You know what? Screw it. Let's go 2%. All right. Thanks, Bob. The 15-second phone call. Imagine how many people who are not interested in getting a Coinbase account, not interested in learning how blockchain works or any of that stuff. They don't want to own their own private key. They don't have to remember all of that, right? They just call up their guy and boom, you have access to Bitcoin. That is how easy it is going to be for all of these other, you know, people. And again, you know, Anthony Pompliano, he's over here on Fox talking basically about the fact that, you know, if you look just over, really take any span, take the past 10 years or whatever you want, you know, the people that are sitting in, you know, stocks, the S&P, for example, or even just Bitcoin, have been outpacing everyone else. And not only have they been outpacing them, they've been beating inflation, making gains, while everyone who's been sitting in cash in their savings account has actually been losing. Okay, not even breaking even, but losing their purchasing power.
I don't know if it's a conspiracy. I don't know if people are that smart, but definitely what's happened is there's a structural issue in America. If you look at the debt, I mean, just in the early 2000s, we were still running a surplus in this country. Now we're running multi-trillion-dollar debts. The total national debt's over $33 trillion. And so if you have this overhang of debt, you've got to go and you've got to devalue the currency. So as they've done that, we've seen this income inequality drastically explode. And so now you have 50% of Americans that are winning who are holding stocks, 50% of Americans that are not holding stocks are losing. And so what we've seen is since about late 1980s and 1990 till today, we went from 30% of US households that held stocks to almost 60%. So we've doubled in the last, 30 something years. And so what that tells you is that people are waking up. They're realizing if I simply hold savings, it is going to get devalued away. I have to go into the market. And so doubling from 30% to 60% of US households now hold US stocks. And so all that tells you is that people are getting smarter, television, internet, et cetera, educating them. And I think that it's only going to continue. What that means is, as an individual, whether you like it or not, you can't change that, right? There's no one individual who's going to be able to change politics or Congress or any of that stuff. So what you have to start thinking about is, with your portfolio, what are you going to do? Right. And what we've seen is that, again, inflation and debt equals returns in stocks, bonds, commodities, Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies, et cetera. And so I think you're going to have an entire generation of people who are growing up in a more financialized world, and they're going to plow all of this capital into financial markets.
So I think we can pretty much admit at this point that the ETF is in fact and will be a game changer, right? But we've talked about the same narratives over and over and over again, but there's three things that a lot of people are also not paying attention to. And Joe Burnett was over here. He was on Mario Nawfal's space, and he broke it down like this.
In my opinion, there are three major benefits of a Bitcoin ETF approval that are not commonly talked about. One is, in the crypto world, everyone wants their token listed on Binance, and in a similar way, but at a 1000x larger scale, Bitcoin will now be listed on Fidelity, E-Trade, and Charles Schwab. Two is Wall Street marketing and research. BlackRock will no longer be saying Bitcoin is a bubble or Bitcoin is a Ponzi scheme. They will be saying that Bitcoin's Sharpe ratio indicates it historically has some of the highest risk-adjusted returns compared to all other asset classes. Now Bitcoin is a necessary component of every portfolio. And by the way, buy our ETF. 3, an ETF destroys unit bias. Most of the world does not know that 1 Bitcoin equals 100 million sats. You don't have to buy a full Bitcoin. The share price of a Bitcoin ETF will be far below $43,000, showing retail investors that a 10x or 100x is very possible. And I think because of these three reasons, many people are underestimating the long-term implications of a Bitcoin ETF approval.
So hopping into the technicals real quick, and I know we haven't really been doing a lot of technical analysis on this channel. I mostly just focus on Bitcoin, as you guys are aware of. Maybe we'll focus on some altcoins a little bit later next year when we start getting that crazy, crazy market mentality. But, ultimately, history doesn't repeat, but it does rhyme. As I've showed you guys, we've had this, this pattern where we break and we have this bump and run, and then we start forming this ascending broadening wedge, and then we go parabolic. Same thing happened here, right? We have this downward sloping trend, we have the bump and run, we break out, and then we go parabolic. And, you could say this was a mid-cycle rally. I mean, we did have COVID right here, but ultimately, I mean, this, this low compared to this low was still a higher low, right? And, what did we do? Same thing. Ascending broadening wedge, boom. And right here, same thing, right? We've had this downwards price action. We had the bump and run. And what are we doing? We're starting to put in potentially, I mean, all we have to do really is get up to about 50,000 to complete this. And who knows, history may be playing out again. I am actually quite shocked, though, how we have been hanging out above this blue zone now for pretty much a month, which is longer than I actually thought we would be, honestly, without a correction. But again, my opinion versus what the market is doing is really irrelevant, because you really just have to pay attention to the price action. Actually, look at this nice retest right here that we're having on this trend. Now, if we had, to fall down to some of those lower levels again, just kind of having a look right here, this CME futures gap and then this area down here, I would say right around here, right around 38,500, because there's not really much in this area, which is honestly why we had that gap to begin with. So again, it's not out of the cards to see Bitcoin, even come down to 38,005 before continuing, right? That would still be a higher low structure. And as of right now, I mean, we usually don't go parabolic this soon in the cycle, but again, maybe it's the ETF anticipation, because right now you could see we are going parabolic. So, obviously, if you think we're going to hold this trend, then yeah, I mean, even if we go down to that 38 level, we should still maintain this trend. Now, obviously, most of the time, Bitcoin does attempt to go to the 0.618. The 0.618 is currently sitting at 48,700. Now, we have not seen that price yet. We are dancing around the 0.5. Historically speaking, Bitcoin loves to go to the 0.618 before having generally those big 30%, 40% pullbacks. So that is within our target range of our falling wedge breakout. So I'm still not going to take 48,000 short term off the cards, right? Or mid-term, I should say. Short term, well, actually, I'm still kind of in the midterm right here. And the midterm and long term is still looking good. The weekly, we're seeing, the money flow moving in. This might be getting a little bit overheated right now if we switch it down to the daily. Yeah, I mean, this is just, and obviously this doesn't mean that, for example, we had the money flow coming out right here. It dipped down, but then what happened? We got bought right back up, right? And you can see the money flow is starting to look like it wants to curve down, right? So that would also signal to me that maybe we want to come down here and at least retest, either the bottom of this breakout for another bump and run, or somewhere in here with these moving averages. But, all these levels basically coincide somewhere between 37 and 39,000. So I'm not really looking for much more of a drawdown, to be honest, than that at that point. And we still have this major from the bottom with these multiple points of contact that we have still never broken. So even if the parabolic trend does get broken per se, I still think that we're going to find ourselves, getting that support on the upwards trend. And again, all obviously major indicators, Guppy, RSI, although the RSI looks like it's finally starting to dip below 70, but for the most part, it's still all pointing very bullish. So that's it for me, guys. Thank you so much for coming back to the channel. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Hopefully the TA will get a little more exciting for Bitcoin. You've been seeing a lot of the altcoins, have these rallies, right? Solana was going, BNB was going, a few others were, bouncing around, making some gains. And obviously it's because a lot of the bigger traders who do trade things like Bitcoin and Ethereum, they're not really trading during the holidays. They're probably not going to really trade much until next year. I wouldn't, sometimes January 2nd or 3rd. I don't know what day January 1st is. It's a Monday, I think. Tuesday. It's Tuesday. So yeah, maybe you got to kind of wait till mid to late next week to start seeing those kind of moves again. But nevertheless, guys, I still remain super bullish especially for the year of 2024. Absolutely. I think it's going to be an incredible year. If you're watching right now, congratulations. If you stuck it out this long, it's time for those rewards to finally be paid back. You guys rock. If you do want to learn how to trade decentralized, check out Apex tutorial. Amazing exchange. The fees are like 60 cents. And I'm going to try to get one out for LevX, hopefully within the next week or so. So that's it for me, guys. Until next time, stay crypto. And of course, peace out.